Welcome back to New Money. We're discussing retirement financial planning. My guests, Lesecha Monering and Jordan Toy. And if you'd like to email me, my email address is info@anchorcapital.co.za. Let's just go back to that, Jordan, the particular point, particularly now, going forward, you are preserving, and also you had some comments about the savings pot.
Yeah, so the two-pot system's been unpacked extensively on your show and just in the industry in general. I think initially, and rightly so, that the concern is around these are retirement funds, they must be preserved for retirement. And I think that logic stands. I've come around to thinking around and looking at the numbers and looking at some anecdotal evidence, and I think we know that a lot of people, or a portion of the working population, was emptying their pension or provident fund in full when they were leaving employment. And I think, maybe somewhat controversially, maybe for a set portion of the population, retirement outcomes might actually be improved because you've got this 2/3 that you mentioned that they can no longer access. So for most of us...
Does it mean to make a point? Because I always am petrified. Access on the future contributions starting from the 1st September. Yeah. So that starts naught.
Yep.
Whatever you've put into your retirement fund is there, and if you ever leave, you get retrenched, whatever the case is, you have access to those funds. You don't need to withdraw or resign from your company to get that first vested portion.
Yes, so the old rules still apply from funds that were in your account up until end of August of this year. But yes, I think pension, for most people who are saving diligently and not looking to access their retirement savings, there's very little change for the two-pot system. Things carry on as is. You have some more options. But I do think for a portion of our labor force, you might have more funds available at retirement for that portion that was typically accessing as much as they could before this rule change. Whereas now you've got 2/3 that cannot be touched under any circumstances, really, or most circumstances.
Yeah. So I want to get on to, which is a hot potato in our industry, fees. And I just want to share with our viewers a situation. I had a client who came to see us a few years ago, and he'd sold a property in Camps Bay for 13 million, and he asked us, what will we charge to manage those funds? Well, most financial planners today on an ongoing basis are charging somewhere between 0.5% to 0.75%. And he was amazed at how much that was. So I asked him, where did you get this money from? And he says, I sold a property. And then I said, and what did you pay the agent? He said, no, I got a very good deal, 5% including that. And I said, and when are you seeing the agent again? And he said, never. So I said, here you are, you sold probably one of your biggest assets you've got, and you paid 5%, and here we're charging you 0.5% to 0.75%. We're going to service you, we're going to see you every quarter. You won't make up that fee with us for at least 10 years. So, Jordan, fees, it's a hot potato, and then performance fees.
100%. So I think just on that example you've mentioned there, I think, when you're selling a house, it's easy to focus less on those costs. You're excited about the new house that you're moving into. Whereas I think when we sit with clients and you're looking at your finances, you're already in that money mindset. You're cost conscious. You're focused on, how well provisioned are you for retirement. So I think that's one point, is that you're already in that mindset. I think performance fees are a very controversial or contentious topic in our industry. I try and look at it from all angles, right? Firstly, from a net returns perspective. So if an investment fund that you're investing in is taking a performance fee, so they're essentially sharing in some of the performance that they're generating for your account, what are you earning at the end of the day? What is your net return? So for me, that's a starting point. Because I think performance fees are not always bad. I think an important point is where there's a high watermark. So let's say you invested at 100 Rand into this unit trust, goes up to 150, right? The investment manager is going to share in a bit of that performance. Fair enough, they've made money for you. Everyone's made some funds. Let's say your investment then drops down to 75. Okay, there's no performance fees charged because there's no new performance. That's fair. If you then recover to say 80, you're still down on where you initially invested. I think that's where problems can emerge in performance fees, where they're charging performance where they're not setting a new high point in value. We call it a high watermark, and I think that's critical. If you're investing in a fund that has performance fees, that a high watermark is important so that you're only paying, or the fund manager's only sharing in performance when they are generating outperformance for you.
Lesecha, we in the industry, people are prepared to pay professionals, accountants, lawyers, doctors. They don't realize that in the event of death, in the event of retirement, there aren't accountants, lawyers and doctors. They're financial planners who are there to see you through, hopefully for the rest of your life. All of us, as we get older, have succession plans, so there are other people to take over and do those things. But your view on fees?
Bryan, exactly. For me, it's what is the cost of not having a financial planner? So when you are making critical decisions like a two-part calculation, a retirement calculation, buying a new asset, immigrating, if you can go without an advisor, then it shouldn't be a problem to pay for it, because the value that they bring to the table, and it's also the emotional decisions. It's the tax calculations. We sit and we work out what is this going to be before you even make that decision. We hold your hand when markets are not good, when inflation rates are high. We actually help you. How are we going to get through this economy? So I think it's unfortunately the value we bring is not always tangible. But if you are not prepared to pay and you feel that you can go without an advisor, then that's the risk that you take. So I think there's definite value in having an advisor, and the work that we do is I think it's a fair deal for clients.
Well, the biggest work we do is to become financial psychologists.
Actually.
Because markets go up and down, and we know that. So that's the time someone's got to hold your hand from making silly mistakes. I need to get some of the emails. Joyce in East London says, what are the important components to consider when you draw up a financial plan? This one's to you.
So look, I think it's definitely a hard bet. I think managing finances in today's economy is a hard act. It's saying if you don't save enough, you run the risk of outliving capital, but you also you need to live a life. What kind of sacrifices are you willing to make? Are your children going to go towards private schools? Do you save more for retirement? So there's a couple of things that you need to consider. Firstly is, where are you at? I think for me that's always such an eye-opener for clients, because we sit and we go through bank statements. I've seen often enough clients don't actually understand what is going on with their money. They don't know when it comes or what's happening with their retirement statements or their pay slips. So it's understanding, where is my money? What is happening with my money? How much do you spend on groceries, transport? How much do you spend on things that you also that are intangible as well? So it's understanding what is going on with money, where it comes from and where it's going. And the other thing is, what are your commitments? So there's expenses that you cannot ignore: school fees, rent, mortgage, and all of those. So we unpack the cash flow in a lot of detail, and then given where you are now, where do you want to be? So, and again, it's very easy not to consider the future, because it's scary. If you're struggling now, you can't think about 10 years ahead of time. But it is important to think about it. It's important to paint the numbers as they stand, because you can actually do something about it today. So the fact that you have a newborn or you have a child, it means in 18 years' time, you're going to have a conversation about where they're going to school, whether you like it or not. So it's understanding.
Where they're going to university.
I
think by the time they get to 18, they've been at school.
Exactly. So, but even that, so as soon as you have a child, what schools you go to, looking at private schools, all of those are very critical. So it's understanding the client's goals, what they want to achieve, what they have to achieve, and what are the ideals, and how do we get to that. And then importantly, then it's to make sure that we draft a plan to help you get there. So, and I say a plan, if you haven't seen your financial advisor for a year, then you probably are not doing the right things, because a lot happens as well. So the fact that you've drafted a financial plan 2 years ago is it might not be relevant, because a lot can happen. You need to understand, you might have a sickness, your health might have changed, you might have increased debt expenses. How does that contribute your savings, and how do we bridge with what is currently going on? So there's a lot that happens. People buy houses, people sell houses. So I think it's important to, when you've drafted a plan, to also go back to it at least every 12 months. So it's something that's a living document, and it has to be adjusted and spoken about as circumstances change. But like I said before, it's very unique. So it's important that it's not good to just Google and have an idea of what's out there. It might not be relevant for you.
Yeah, it's actually very much like a will. It's not a bottom drawer. It's something that's got to be looked at. Jordan, your comments, and then I also want to ask you about how can people, the Secha made the point about people struggling. If you're struggling today and you're not making plans and being very careful, you're actually going to struggle financially your entire life. So maybe you've got to spend a little bit more time really doing what you've got to do now to help ease the struggle. But I'll give you one example of expenses. I saw a client a few months ago. They never pay their credit card in full. I said, bring me your credit cards from a few. They were paying an average of 450 Rand a month in interest. Because if you pay your credit card in full, there's no interest. If you don't pay it in full, there's interest from day one, even if you pay part of it. And I said to them, if you've been doing this for years, work out if you had saved that 450 Rand and invested it, you'll laugh over 5 or 10 years what that will be worth. So that's just what. But Gordon, where else?
I think, and Lesego touched on a lot of these points, and you mentioned the credit card debt, and it's a very high interest rate you pay on a credit card. So I think the first thing is getting to grips with what does everything look like now? Because I think a lot of the time we're all guilty of focusing on day to day, make it through this day, then the next day, and then the next day. And you sort of forget to look up at the long-term view and what is the plan down the road. And yeah, exactly that. The first thing is take stock of where are we now? What is maybe not ideal in our current financial situation, like you mentioned the credit card example. Only from there can we then say, well, okay, what changes do we need to make, as you said, to try and improve the outcomes for the next month and the next year and the next decade. So I think you've got to take stock of where you are currently and have a hard look and have honest conversations with yourself on what your financial situation is like, and then start formulating plans.
Yeah. Well, we didn't get through quite a lot of questions this evening, and there's questions about taking loans, but we'll do it in our next program. A question that I leave with you tonight is to our viewers is, do you spend enough time evaluating your retirement journey? And I think that's absolutely critical. These are not just programs that we put together. All the programs that you read and hear about and watch are about saying to you, you need to do something now. Lesego, Jordan, thank you for joining me this evening. It's important to note that our program tonight is to provide information and should not be construed as advice. Next week's program, we'll be dealing with estate planning, and if you need to get hold of me, my details will appear on the screen. I'd like to thank you for watching, and good night.